We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 77b. The Gemara here continues. Detani Rabbi Zakkai Kami de Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Zakkai taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Ki im besula me'amov yikach isha. It says that the Kohen Gadol can only marry a besula. Lahavi gioris mikana, that includes a gioris mikana. Rashi will explain. She ksheira lekahuna, that woman is ksheira lekahuna. That's what Rabbi Zakkai said in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Rashi over here says, Detani Rabbi Zakkai kolomar mehai klola shaminan leil Rabbi Yochanan demachsha. We're going to hear from this as the discussion continues in the Gemara. We're going to hear from here that Rabbi Yochanan allows a case of an Ammoni, a ger Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael. That daughter is going to be ksheira lekahuna. So first, Rabbi Zakkai said that the pasuk comes to include giyores mikana mimachona kilomar she'avia v'ima me'amecha. The case over here is that the father and mother were all from one nation. V'nolda b'kedusha. Now they converted, and when that child was born, the child was already born automatically b'kedusha. The child was Jewish. In other words, that girl, that daughter, can marry a Kohen Gadol if her two parents are converts and they converted before she was born. Now the point over here is that Rabbi Zakkai was saying it has to be that the father and the mother were from one nation to exclude a case of a ger Ammoni that married a Bas Yisrael, excluding Rabbi Yochanan's case. That's not called mikana because the relationship is an aveira. A ger Ammoni is not allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael, and therefore the daughter is psula lekahuna according to Rabbi Zakkai. That is what Rabbi Zakkai said to Rabbi Yochanan. V'yomar lei, and so then Rabbi Yochanan responded to him, to Rabbi Zakkai, said as follows: Ani shona amov me'amov. I make a drush, it says me'amov, and it could have just said amov. Lahavi besula habami beis amamin. That comes to include even a besula who comes from two nations. V'yat amrit giores mikano vesulo, and you're only saying mikano and no further, meaning to say Rabbi Yochanan says, I go a step further. Rashi over here says, amov me'amov, midamazi lemechta besulas amov yikoch. It could have just said the word amov. Uchsiv me'amov, afilu mimixas amov. It means even if it's partially from the nation, meaning to say amov v'amacher, it's partially from his nation and partially from another nation. Lahavi besula haba mishnei amamin. That comes to include even a besula who comes from two nations. It's from this line that we understand that Rabbi Yochanan allows, let's say, a ger Ammoni who marries a Bas Yisrael, that daughter is going to be kasheira lekahuna. And the Gemara continues and elaborates, Mai shnei amamin. So what exactly did Rabbi Yochanan mean when he said shnei amamin? Ilema Ammoni shenasa Ammonis. So if you're going to say it means the case of an Ammoni who married an Ammonis, so umay mishnei amamin, and what does it mean two amamin? You'll say it's like two amamin because the males of Ammon are usher to marry into the kahal, and the nekevos, the females of Ammon, are mutter to marry into the kahal. But the problem is, hainu gioris mikana, that actually would be the same thing as a gioris mikana. There'd be no difference. That would be a situation where the father and the mother are really from one nation, and the child is born b'kedusha. So it can't be that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that. That would be the same thing effectively that Rabbi Zakkai says. Ela ba'ammoni shenasa Bas Yisrael. Rather, the case must be, we're talking about a situation of an Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael. That's not the same exact thing as a gioris mikana, and he's coming to include even that case that she is ksheira lekahuna. And the Gemara continues, V'ika diamri, there are those who have a different version of exactly what Rabbi Yochanan responded to Rabbi Zakkai. Amar le, he said to him, Ani shona amov me'amov. I learned the drasha that it could have said amav and it said me'amov. And what does that include? Lohavi besula haba mishnei amamin. That comes to include a besula that comes from two nations. Ume'am sheyesh bo shnei amamin. And one of those nations has within it two nations. V'yat amr gioris mikana vesulo. And you're just saying a gioris mikana is permitted and nothing more. Rashi over here explains the other version. Ika diamri hachi kamar le behedya. According to this version, he said to him explicitly, Lahavi besula haba mishnei amamin mi Yisraelis v'ger v'oso ger have a me'am sheyesh bo shnei amamin. He was saying that the child, the daughter, comes from a Yisraelis and a ger, and that ger himself is coming from a nation that has two factions, so to speak. The Hainu Ammoni, that refers to the Ammoni, because again, the Ammoni males cannot marry the kol, but the Ammonis, the females, are allowed to marry into the kol. So according to this version, he said explicitly, we're talking talking about a case of an Ammoni with a Yisraelis. That daughter is Ksheira L'Kahuna. But the Gemara says, Ulahach Lishna, but according to the second version, Bas Mitzri Sheni de Ksheira L'Kahuna Minole. So where do we know the other teaching of Rabbi Yochanan, that the daughter of a Mitzri Sheni is Ksheira L'Kahuna? Rashi over here says, Ulahai Lishna de Katani Behedya de Lo Marbi Ala Bas Ammoni. According to this, we're specifically including the daughter of an Ammoni, de Katani Me'am Sheyesh Bo Shnei Amin. That's what it says, from a nation that has two factions, two nations within it, meaning the Ammonim. So Bas Mitzri Sheni, how would you know the following case? Let's say the daughter of a Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Yisraelis. Let's say a Mitzri Sheni marries a Yisraelis, very similar to the Ammoni marrying a Yisraelis. Ubi also Ba'avera, and the Bias Ba'avera. Minole Rabbi Yochanan de Ksheira. Where would we know, according to this version, that Rabbi Yochanan was saying even that case is going to be Ksheira? And the Gemara continues, V'chi Tema. Now, if you will suggest the Yolif Me Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael, that we could just learn it out. It's the same thing. A Mitzri Sheni that marries a Bas Yisrael is the same thing as an Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael. We should learn out one from the other, but it's not exactly the same. Mala Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael Shekain Nekevos Mutaros. By the Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael, in general, the Nekevos are Mutaros when it comes to the Ammonim. As Rashi over here explains, Mala Ammoni Shekain Nekevos Ammonios Mutaros Miyad. When it comes to the Ammonim, the females are mutar right away. Tomer b'Mitzri Sheni Shehechmer b'hem Akos v'Lasos Nekevos Kizachar Mat Shlosha Doros. But when it comes to the Mitzri Sheni, so the pasuk is strict by them. The females are just like the males until 3 generations. But the Gemara says, Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzris Shenia Yochiach. In a case of a Mitzri Sheni who marries a Mitzris Shenia, that should prove the other way. Rashi over here says, Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzris Shenia Yochiach Shebito Ksheira. In that case, his daughter is Ksheira. Sharei Shlishasi, because of course she's the 3rd generation already. V'afa pi sheyesh bo en tzad chomor kedeka amar. Now, even though there's a tzad chomor over there, meaning by the Mitzrayim in general, there is a side of strictness because the females are treated like the males. V'afilu hachisha. Nevertheless, it's permitted. So too, again, I should include this case. Let's say you have a situation of a Mitzri Sheni with a Yisraelis. We should say that's Ksheira. Hoel Varei Shlish is Ksheira Lakuna. Since she is the 3rd generation, she should be Ksheira Lakuna in this case as well. But the Gemara says, Ma'ala Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzri Shenia. But you can say that no, you can't bring a proof from Mitzri Sheni who marries a Mitzri Shenia. Shekain Ein Biyaso Ba'avera, because over there, there's no Avera in the relationship. A Mitzri Sheni is allowed to marry a Mitzri Shenia. And so the Gemara says, Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael Yochiach. But we can prove from the case of the Ammoni that marries a Bas Yisrael again, that is a forbidden relationship. That proves the other way. V'chazar Adin V'chula, we go back and forth again, and we find the common denominator, as Rashi over here says, V'chazar what is common with both of these cases? She'eno barov kol. Again, you're talking about situations of people that cannot marry into the majority of the community. Uvito ksheira, and the daughter is ksheira, and so therefore we'll say that the same thing is going to be true in a situation of a bas mitzri sheni shenasa Yisraelis. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef says, Hainu de Shamana Leila Rav Yehuda. That's what I heard Rav Yehuda say, to Amar Amov Me'amov. He said something about a drasha that it could have said Amov, and instead it said Me'amov. V'lo yadana my kamar. I didn't know what he was talking about, but now we see this is the drasha of Rabbi Yochanan right over here. As Rashi over here says, V'lo yadana my kamar ma have a dorish ba. I didn't know what the drasha was. Aval hashto yadana, but now I understand the lachshure bas amoni shenasa bas Yisrael ka'asi. That drasha is coming to permit if you have again a bas amoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael, meaning the daughter of an Ammoni who married a Bas Yisrael, that daughter is going to be Ksher L'Kahuna. That's what we learn out from this pasuk. And the Gemara continues, Ki Asa Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Omar. When Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, he said, Hachi Tana Kamei. Here's really what Rav Zakkai said before Rav Yochanan. He said as follows: Isha Ammonis Kshera, and Isha Ammonis is Kshera. This will all be explained in Rashi. Bino me Ammoni Pasul. Now her son from an Ammoni is going to be Pasul. Ubito me Ammoni Kshera, and her daughter from an Ammoni is going to be Kshera. Ba'med Devarim Amurim, and when is all of this true? Ba'Ammoni ve'Ammonis shenis Gaira. We're talking about an Ammoni and Ammonis who converted. Avol Bita me Ammoni Psula, but her daughter from an Ammoni is going to be Psula. Amar Le, so now in this version, Rabbi Yochanan says back to Rav Zakkai, Pok Tani Livra. Go teach that outside. This is all incorrect. And now Rabbi Yochanan explains his objections to what Rabbi Zakkai said. My diamr, that which you said, Isha Ammonis Kshera, you said that a woman who's an Ammonis is Kshera. The assumption is that a woman who's an Ammonis can marry into the community. So Ammoni v'lo Ammonis, that's obvious. We already know Ammoni v'lo Ammonis. If a woman from Ammon converts, she's allowed to marry into the community. It's an explicit drasha. You wouldn't need to teach it in a brisa. B'noah me Ammoni pasul. Then you said her son from an Ammoni is going to be pasul. That's also obvious. Deha Ammonihu. Of course he's pasul. He's an Ammoni. Like we said, the Ammoni is going to be pasul. Uvita me'amoni kshera. Now her daughter from an Ammoni is going to be kshera. So lamai. So what do you mean in terms of that halacha? Kshera for what? Ilay malavo bekal. If you mean that the daughter, meaning the daughter of an Ammonis and Ammoni is kshera lavo bekal, she can marry into the community. Hashta ima kshera himi. Boy, we already said the mother is kshera to marry into the community. Of course she is. You don't even need to teach that. It's obvious. Ela kahuna. Rather, what it means to say is the bita, the daughter, can marry into kahuna, meaning to say again, you have an Ammoni and an Ammonis together, and then they have a daughter. That daughter can marry into the kahuna. When is this true? That's only true when the Ammoni and the Ammonis they converted. But if it would be her daughter from an Ammoni, then it would be psula. Now, what does that mean? My bita me Ammoni. What does it mean? Her daughter from an Ammoni. Ilema Ammoni shenosa Ammonis. Now, if it's again the same case we had above, the Ammoni that marries the Ammonis, hainu gioris mikana. That's a perfectly legitimate gioris, and we already said that's going to be kshera. Ela Ammoni shenosa bas Yisrael. Rather, what you must be saying at the very end, or what it must be saying at the end, is if an Ammoni marries a bas Yisrael, that daughter is going to be psula lekahuna, and so for that reason, Amar Le, that's why Rabbi Yochanan said back to Rabbi Zakkai, poke tani livra. Go teach that outside. It's not true. An Ammoni who marries a bas Yisrael, the daughter is kshera lekahuna. And Rashi over here explains, Hachi tana kamei Rabbi Zakkai kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. Here's what Rabbi Zakkai taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. He taught him the following brisa: Isha Ammonis mefarish lo lekamei. Everything's going to be explained as we go on. Amar Le poktani livra. So then Rabbi Yochanan said back, go teach that outside. It's not a good brisa. The Ma'idakamer Isha Ammonis kshera lekal. That which you said that a woman who's an Ammonis can marry into the community. Shapir kamer. That's true. The Ammoni velo Ammonis, because the halach is Ammoni velo Ammonis. Uvenom me Ammoni pasal lekal do Ammoni. And of course her son from the Ammoni is pasal, because that's an Ammoni. Bita me Ammoni kshera. Now her daughter from the Ammoni is kshera. Leman, who's she kosher to? Ile molakal hashto ima. Now, if you're going to say she can marry into the community, what do you mean? Of course, if the mother shelo nolda b'kedusha, that she wasn't born b'kedusha, she just converted. Amr kshera, you're saying she's kshera. So bita shenolda b'kedusha. If you have her daughter who married b'kedusha, mi boy, do we even need to say that? So ela lekahuna. Rather, what it must mean is we're talking about kahuna. V'hadr tani, and then it teaches as follows: B'amedvar mamurim b'amoni v'amonish and isgairu. If you have an Ammoni and Ammonis, they convert v'yolda lo bas, and they have a daughter. De'en yitzirasa ba'avera. The creation of that girl was not ba'avera. V'hi gioris mikana. She's again what we would call a gioris mikana. So that's going to be okay for kahuna. Avol bita me'amoni psula. But her daughter from an Ammoni is going to be psula lekahuna. Umaihi. So what's that case? Ilema bita shel Ammonis me'amoni. If you're going to say it's the same case we just said, the daughter of an Ammonis and an Ammoni, hainu gioris mikana. That's gioris mikana. V'achshartla. That we already said is kosher. So that can't be what we're talking about. Tani Reisha, bita me'amoni kshera. We already said her daughter from an Ammoni is kshera. You have an Ammoni marries an Ammonis and they have a daughter, kshera lekahuna. Elavadai seifa de kapasalt. Rather, the end of the brisa where it's saying pasal, be'amoni shanasa bas Yisrael. It must be the very case we're discussing over here the whole time. An Ammoni marries a bas Yisrael, mishum de biyaso ba'avera, because the relationship was ba'avera. Therefore, the daughter is not kshera lekahuna, and that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Pok tani levra. Go teach that outside. Dohanami kshera. That's also kshera. She's also kshera. Sharei anishona amov me'amov. Because I learn again the drasha we had above. It could have said amov, and it says me'amov. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Mitzri v'adomi einon asur and v'chulu. It said, Mitzri and Adomi is only asur for 3 generations. And then Rabbi Shimon said, the females, they're going to be mutter right away. And how did he learn that out? He learned that out because he said, if by Ammon and Moav, where we say that the males are prohibited forever, but the females are permitted right away, so that by the Mitzri and the Adomi, where it's just 3 generations, so certainly the females should be permitted right away. And the Rabbanan said back, if that's a tradition, fine. But if you're learning this out from some kind of logical limud, with some kind of kal v'chomer, there's a refutation. And so the Gemara now says, Mai teshuva, what is the refutation? Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabba bar bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum di'iko lemeimar arayos yochichu, because we can say that arayos proves the other way. Shelo asar behen elo ad shlosha doros, because over there the prohibition is only 3 generations. Echad zecharim v'echad nekevos, and it applies to both males and females. And so the same thing should be true by Mitzri and Adomi. The prohibition being 3 generations should be by males and females. Rashi over here says, Arayos yochichu, shelo asar ben elo shlosha doros. Really, by arayos arayos also it's just 3 generations, meaning to say bas bito asura lo v'hu bechlal, the daughter of his daughter is asur to him and him included. To have a dor shlishi, that's 3 generations. V'yasa ben nekevos kizacharim, and the same thing is true. Males are the same as females. Bas bito kebas beno. For example, the daughter of his daughter is the same as the daughter of his son. And again, that prohibition in the Torah is just 3 generations. So therefore, that proves that it could be from males and females by a prohibition that lasts for 3 generations. But the Gemara continues, Mala arayos shekain kares. But what is unique about arayos is that arayos is a situation of kares, as Rashi over here says. Shekain kares tomer b'mitzri v'adomi. When it comes to mitzri and adomi, she'eno elo asay. It's only an asay. It says dor shlishi yavo lehem, that the 3rd generation can come. V'lo rishon v'sheni. We understand only the 3rd is permitted and not the 1st and 2nd. V'lav haba mechlal asay asay. If you have a negative commandment implied from a positive, that's considered an asay, a positive. Helkach lo nasabo nekevos kizacharm. Therefore, we shouldn't say the nekevos are like the zacharm when it comes to mitzri and adomi, because it's not a situation of kares. And so the Gemara continues, Mamzer yochiach. So Mamzer can prove the other way, as Rashi over here says. Mamzer yochiach she'ein kares. So Mamzer, there's no kares over there. Bibi also when he has relations. V'also bo bito kivino, and the halach is the daughter is the same as the son. Di'echad mamzeres, v'echad mamzer aser. Both a mamzeres and a mamzer are aser. So we have Mamzer that proves the other way. And the Gemara says, though mala mamzer, but what is unique about mamzer? Shekain eino roy lava bekali olam. Mamzer is forever. The mamzer is not allowed to enter the community forever, so you can't compare again to our case. And the Gemara says, arayos yochichu. So arayos can prove the other way. V'chazer hadin will go back and forth. Lo roy zeh karoi zeh, v'lo roy zeh karoi zeh. The case of arayos is not the same as mamzer. Mamzer is not the same as arayos. Hatzad hashavish abehen. What is the common denominator? Sha'asurin v'echad zechorim v'echad nekevos. In all of these cases, it's prohibited, and the prohibition applies to both males and females. Afani avi mitzri u'mitzris, so too the same is true by mitzri and mitzris. Sheyu asurin, that it's going to be forbidden. Echad zechorim v'echad nekevos. It applies to both males and the females. And Rashi over here explains, arayos yochichu, arayos prove the other way. Sheksherim l'chol Yisrael, because these arayos, these individuals, they're kosher to marry everybody else, unlike the mamzer, chutz mikrovim, except for the relatives. So therefore, even though mamzer, you said it's unique that they're not allowed to marry into the kahal liolam, but arayos, they are allowed to marry into the kahal in general. But the Gemara continues, but there's another common denominator between the case of arayos and the case of mamzer, and that is that all of them involve kares in some fashion. Rashi over here says, sad kares, sharei mamzer, afal b'shein kares b'biyaso. Let's say mamzer, even though there's no kares when he has relations, mikol makam yesh kares b'yitzirasa, but he was created with a forbidden relationship at the level of kares. Shenolad meisha, she loved b'kares, because a mamzer is a person who was born from a man and woman who were together in a relationship, which is a chi of kares, and therefore you can't prove again to our case of mitzri and adomi. And so the Gemara continues, V'Rabbanan. So what will the Rabbanan respond if we're now saying there is a tzad hashava that doesn't allow us to prove from arayos and mamzer? So then again, it seems Rabbi Shimon is right. Rabbi Shimon's making a kal v'chomer and saying just like by Ammon and Moab the females are permitted, so too by Mitzri and Adomi the females are permitted. So where are the Rabbanan refuting the kal v'chomer of Rabbi Shimon? And so the Gemara says mecholol. They're actually refuting it from the case of cholol. The chai ve'aseh, because cholol is just a chai ve'aseh. Uch Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and they're following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rashi over here explains, V'Rabbanan de'amri yesh teshuva. According to the Rabbanan who say there is a refutation, Parchinan leila Rabbi Shimon mecholol dechai ve'aseh. They really ask the question on Rabbi Shimon from the case of cholol, which is chai ve'aseh. What would be a case? Kagon kohen gadol shenasa anuso mefuta she'olav bi'aseh. Let's say a kohen gadol marries an anusa or mefuta. That's a prohibition of an aseh. Besula yikach v'lo be'ula, because he's supposed to marry only a besula, only a virgin, and not a be'ula. Someone who's an anusa mefuta is a be'ula. V'yein kan lav de zona. Now we're trying to get rid of the lavin over here. We're trying to make it only in aseh. There's no lav of zona in this case. The lekalaman de amar bias penuyas nusi, because nobody says the bia of the penuyas is nus. El Rebbe Lazar, the only one who says that is Rebbe Lazar, that says bias penuyas considers nus. V'les hilchas hakivase, the halach isn't like Rebbe Lazar. Kedamar beperak habal yevemto v'ka'amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hasam havlad cholon. Now Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov over there happens to say that in that case case where there is a prohibition of chai ve'aseh, the child has the status of a cholol. That's the cholol we're talking about over here. V'hachi parchi lei Rabbanan Rabbi Shimon. So here's the refutation of the Rabbanan to Rabbi Shimon. Arayos yochichu. First, we're going to prove it from Arayos. The case of Arayos goes 3 generations and applies to males and females. So the same thing should be true by Mitzri and Adomi. And then we say Mala Arayos shekain kares. But Arayos is a case of kares, so you can't prove from there. And then we say cholol de chai ve'aseh yochiach. But the case of cholol of a chai ve'aseh, meaning a cholol who was born from a relationship of chai ve'aseh, that should prove the other way. She'ein bo kares, that's not a case of kares. Va'asura habas kiben, and we treat the daughter the same as the son, and so therefore the same should be true. By the case of Mitzri and Adomi, the women and the men should be prohibited. But then we say ma lecholol shekein yitzira, so ba'avera, cholol is unique, he was created ba'avera. Lefika chasa nekevas kizachar, maybe that's why the males are treated like the females. The Gemara then says, Arayas yochichu, Arayas will prove the other way, she'ein yitzirasam ba'avera, they weren't created, those individuals weren't created in any avera. V'yasar bas bito kebas beno, and the daughter of his daughter is the same as the daughter of his son, meaning we treat the males and the females alike, and so that will be the refutation of the Rabbanon. And so the Gemara continues, according to this, umay low key. So what is the response of Rabbi Shimon where he says low key? As Rashi over here says, my low key, demashma de'ein shuvaschem teshuva. The response of Rabbi Shimon implies that what their refutation is not really a good refutation. And so the Gemara explains, here is the response of Rabbi Shimon. Hachi kamar lu, here's what he's saying to them. Lididi lo svira li de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. According to me, I don't hold like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov anyway. And Rashi over here explains, lo svira li de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. De'ein cholol mechai ve'aseh. I don't hold that there's a cholol from chai ve'aseh. Umei cholol de chai ve'lavin lo matzisu lemifrach. Now you can't ask a question from a cholol of chai ve'lavin de'iko lemifrach, because you can refute that. Malahanoch shekain lav, those cases are lav. Tomer b'mitzri ve'adomi shein aseh ve'in chomer. Again, mitzri and adomi, those are cases of an aseh, and it's not as strict. So according to me, your refutation is nothing, because I don't hold like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. L'didchu desvir l'chuk Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but according to you who say that you do hold like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, so halacha ani omer. I'm saying a halacha over here, as Rashi over here says, l'didchu nami desvir l'chu yesh cholol. You hold there is a cholol from aseh. Halacha ani omer shanekevos mutar. So I'm saying a halacha, I have a tradition that the nekevos are mutaros. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, so Amar lehen Rabbi Shimon said to them, halacha ani omer, I'm saying a halacha from tradition, v'od mikra misayeni, but also there's a pasuk that supports me, bonim velo bonos, because the pasuk says bonim, so it only means the sons, and the daughters are going to be permitted. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, bonim velo bonos, it's sons and not daughters, divrei Rabbi Shimon, that's Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, harehu omer, but the pasuk says, bonim asher yivoldu lehem dor shlishi. It says the sons that are born to them from the 3rd generation, hakasav talon belay, that the pasuk is really making it dependent on the birth, and therefore, as we'll see in Rashi in a moment, that should indicate that the nekevos also are going to be aser. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Ilav de Amar Rabbi Yehuda hakasav talon beleid, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says that the pasuk makes it dependent on the birth, lo motza yada v'ragla bebeis hamedrash, he wouldn't have been able to find any footing in the beis medrash, meaning he wouldn't have been able to defend his position at all. Because Kevan Damar Mar, because since the master said, Kahal Gerim Ikri Kahal, that the community of Gerim that he holds, that Gerim are considered to be Kahal, and we'll take a look at Rashi over here. Rashi over here says, number 1, Asher Yivoldu Kol Hanoladim Lohem, Afilu Nekeva B'mashma. So Rabbi Yehuda says, anyone that's born, that implies even the females. That's what it means, Hakasav Talon Beleda. Lishna Achrin, another way of understanding, Talon Beleda means to say as follows, Tala Habonim Be'im Sheyoledis Asam. We're saying the sons are going to be permitted, but it's dependent on the mother who gave birth to them. Dimhi Rishona Haben Sheni, means to say that if she's a Rishona, so then the ben is only considered a Sheni. And the ben is only considered a shlishi if she's a shniya. V'lavd in nekevos asuros. Now, if not for the fact that the females are asuros, l'may hilchas atzalon beleda, why should this all be dependent on their birth, meaning on the mother? So you see by implication that the females also are going to be prohibited. And so then the Gemara said, Ilav da'am Rabbi Yehuda hakasav talon beleda, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said that the pasuk makes it dependent on the birth, meaning to say in nekevos nami asuros, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said the nekevos are going to be be prohibited. Lo matza yada v'ragla bebeis hamedrash. He wouldn't have been able to find his footing in the beis medrash. Kilomar lo haya yachol amud b'dvarav, meaning his own words wouldn't have been able to sustain themselves. Why? Because kevan damar mar kahal gerim mikri kol. Because since the master said that a community of gerim is called kahal, but Mesechet kedushin, that's in Mesechet kedushin. I'iza de nekevos sharian la'alter. So if he would have held, meaning if Rabbi Yehuda would have held that the females of the Mitzri and the Adomi are permitted immediately, so havalu kol. So based on that, they would be called the kol. They would be considered part of the community. And the problem is va'asuros mitzris rishona u'shniya lemitzri rishon v'sheni. Now that would prohibit a mitzris rishona or shniya, meaning a female convert Egyptian, first or second generation, would not be allowed to marry the male mitzri who's a convert first or second generation. So then b'mei yitaru. So if that's the case, who are they going to be able to marry to purify themselves, so to speak, to even make a third generation? V'yavo lidei dor shlishi, so that it should come to a third generation. So in other words, according to Rabbi Yehuda, by him saying that the nekevos asuros, that prevents the nekevos from being considered kahal, and that's what allows the mitzri rishon to marry the mitzris the rishona, and the same thing by the mitzri sheni marrying the mitzri shniya, and that's what allows the purification, so to speak, of the third generation. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Aleph.